Be honest with yourself for a second. You have noticed it for longer than you have admitted. Maybe it was Thanksgiving 2 years ago, or a birthday dinner you had planned carefully. You called, you invited. You made sure they knew they were wanted, and they said no, or they came late and left early, or they sat at the edge of the table and barely touched their food, and when you looked over at them, you caught something on their face that you could not quite name. It was not tiredness, it was not boredom, it was something quieter than that, something that made you feel, for just a moment, that you had done something wrong. You probably told yourself they were getting older, that crowds tire them out, that they just were not as social as they used to be. You moved on, but the dinners kept coming and they kept pulling back, and that original feeling never fully went away. And here is what made it harder. You kept inviting them. Every single time. You made the call. You saved them a seat. You asked again and again because you wanted them there, genuinely wanted them there, and still something kept widening the distance between their chair and the rest of the table. You have not done anything wrong. That is the first thing you need to hear before anything else. This is not about you. This is not a rejection of your table, your family, or your love. What is happening at those dinners is something much older and much deeper than an invitation. And once you understand it, you will never read your parents' empty chair the same way again. Think about what a family dinner actually is. On the surface, it is food, conversation, and people you love gathered in one place. But underneath that, it is a structure. There is someone who organized it, someone who cooked or decided where to go, someone who holds the conversation, who makes the decisions, and who the younger children look to for cues on how to behave. For most of your parents' adult life, that person was them. They were the ones who set the table, who knew everyone's order, who quietly made sure the evening held together. That role was not just something they did. It was who they were at that table. And at some point, gradually, without any formal announcement, that role passed to you, to your partner, to the next generation. And your parents showed up to a dinner where they used to be the center of gravity and discovered they had become a guest. Not an unwelcome guest, a loved guest, but a guest nonetheless. And that distinction, as gentle as it sounds, cuts deeper than most people realize. What they felt in that moment was not ingratitude, it was grief. Specific, unspoken, deeply private grief for a version of themselves they did not realize was already gone. And grief, when it has no acceptable name and no permitted outlet, does not disappear. It finds a shape. Sometimes that shape is distance. Sometimes it is a polite excuse offered at the last minute. Sometimes it is a parent who arrives, sits quietly at the edge of everything they built, and leaves before dessert is served. What looks like withdrawal from the outside is actually a person trying to protect themselves from a feeling they cannot yet name. And that is a distinction that changes everything. Here is the layer most people miss entirely. Before the psychology, before the neurology, there is something simpler and more painful sitting underneath all of it. Your parent is grieving a version of the family that no longer exists. Not because anything went wrong, because everything went right. They raised children who became capable adults. They built a family that no longer requires them to hold it together. And now they sit at a table surrounded by the proof of everything they worked for and feel quietly and without any drama like a person standing outside a window looking in at a life that used to be theirs to run. That specific grief has no ceremony. Nobody marks the day it begins. It simply arrives one dinner at a time, and most parents carry it in complete silence because they would never want you to feel responsible for it. Researchers who study aging and role transition have found that the loss of functional identity, the roles through which a person express their competence and their love, is one of the most psychologically disorienting experiences of late life. It does not announce itself like an illness. It arrives in the texture of ordinary moments, a dinner where someone else pours the wine, a conversation where you are asked what you want instead of being the one who decides, a table where everyone is perfectly happy and completely fine without you having to do anything. That last part is the hardest because your parents spent their whole life being needed, and now the proof that they are loved is also the proof that they are no longer essential. Those two things, being loved and being needed, felt like the same thing for most of their life. Aging is the slow, quiet discovery that they are not. There is also something happening neurologically that most people never consider. As the brain ages, environments with multiple simultaneous conversations, background noise, and competing sensory information become genuinely harder to process. This is not a personality change. It is a documented neurological shift in how the aging brain filters and prioritizes sound and stimulation. What your parent is experiencing at a loud family dinner is not emotional discomfort alone. It is cognitive overload layered directly on top of emotional loss. They are working twice as hard just to follow the conversation, smiling through it, nodding at the right moments, and then driving home alone in silence without saying a single word about how hard that actually was. The exhaustion you sometimes read as disinterest is the effort it takes to stay present in a world that has gotten louder, while its capacity to navigate that loudness has quietly narrowed. But the deepest layer, the one that tends to arrive last and land hardest, is this. It is not just about the role they lost at the table. It is about which role. There is a concept in gerontology called role exit, the process by which a person psychologically separates from an identity they once held at the center of who they were. For your parent, the dinner table was never just a place to eat. It was the stage where their most important identity played out. Provider, decision maker, the person who knew how everyone took their coffee and which child needed a quiet word pulled aside before the evening ended. That identity was not a job title that could be updated on a resume. It was the answer to the question, who am I to these people? And when it began to transfer, quietly, lovingly, necessarily, to you and your generation, what your parent lost was not just a seat at the head of the table. They lost the clearest answer they had ever had to that question. Their generation was taught that worth was earned through function, through providing, protecting, solving, feeding, and carrying. They were not raised with a language for what they are now feeling, which is the specific ache of being deeply loved by people who no longer need you in the ways that once defined you. So they do what their generation always did with feelings that had no acceptable name. They go quiet. They decline. They say they are tired. They sit at the edge and leave early. Not because they do not want to be there, because being there without a role to play is one of the most disorienting experiences of their lives. And because admitting that would feel, to them, like asking for something they were raised never to ask for. Their silence is not coldness. It is the only coping tool their generation was ever given. Here is what you can do, and be specific about it, because vague good intentions are not enough here. Before the next family dinner, call them, not to remind them about the event, just to ask a question that only they can answer. How did you make that dish? What did we use to do for this occasion when I was young? Let them be the expert for 5 minutes, before anyone has sat down at any table. And then, at the dinner itself, seat them somewhere with one person beside them, rather than at the center of the noise. Give them one real thing to be in charge of: the bread, the opening story, the first toast. Not a symbolic gesture, a genuine one. Something the dinner would feel slightly incomplete without. And after everyone has gone home, sit with them for 10 minutes, just the two of you in the quiet after. Ask them what they remember about a dinner from years ago. Let them be the one who knows something the rest of the room does not. Those 10 minutes are not a small thing. To them, it may be the thing they think about for the rest of the week. The window you have with them is real, and it is not unlimited, not because of anything dramatic or frightening, but simply because time moves the way time moves, and the dinners that have already passed cannot be called back. The chair that was empty last Thanksgiving will be empty again if nothing changes. And what is different now is that you know why. You are no longer guessing. You are no longer taking it personally or filing it away as just another quirk of getting older. You understand what is actually happening inside the person who raised you, and that understanding is not a small thing. It is the difference between sending another invitation and actually bringing them back to the table. You do not have to fix everything. You do not have to have a conversation about role loss or identity or any of the things we have talked about today. You just have to show up slightly differently than you did before. Make one phone call that asks instead of tells. Reserve one moment at the next dinner that belongs to them. Create one pocket of quiet after everyone has gone, where they are the person who still knows something worth knowing. These are not grand gestures. They are small, deliberate acts of recognition. And for a generation that was never taught to ask for recognition, being seen without having to ask for it is one of the most profound things you can offer. The person you love is still at the table, even when their chair is empty. They are just waiting to find out if there is still a place there that genuinely needs them. If this shifted something for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you do not miss what we uncover next. Your parent sitting in their chair at home tonight, the house quiet around them, a cup of tea gone cold on the table beside them, thinking about the last time everyone was together.